The laugh she let out wasn't the polite, practiced one people offer at social gatherings. It snapped through the room, sharp and sudden, slicing straight through the background chatter. I felt the shift immediately, dozens of eyes turning, settling on us, on me. Belle raised the small wrapped box between two fingers, holding it delicately, almost disdainfully, like it was something sticky she accidentally picked up. "What a ridiculous present, Mom. You've always been useless." Her words fell heavy and flat. I didn't blink, didn't inhale, didn't dare move. Somewhere nearby, a glass hit a table a little too hard. No one spoke. Belle shoved the box back at me, the corner jabbing into the side of the chocolate cake I'd spent half the night making. A thick smear of frosting slid across my blouse, warm, sweet, and humiliating, dripping down to my elbow before a drop fell to the floor. Not a single person bent down to wipe it. 80 guests stood frozen. Neighbors, co-workers, people whose children I'd watched grow up, yet not a soul stepped forward. Caleb lingered beside the dessert table, clutching a champagne flute like he wasn't sure what to do with his hands. When I met his eyes, he looked away, pretending to study the candles flickering beside him. My heartbeat pulsed in my ears. I carefully set the cake down, avoiding the dent in its side. My fingers smelled of sugar and humiliation. Someone whispered. Someone coughed. But the air remained thick and unmoving. I smoothed the frosting on my blouse with trembling hands, inhaled, and walked toward the exit. The cold outside slapped against my skin the moment the door shut behind me. The music inside dulled to a distant hum, muffled by the walls, as if the celebration belonged to someone else's world entirely. I stood on the porch, staring at the parked cars lining the street, trying to understand how a night meant to celebrate my son had carved something open inside me instead. I didn't wait for Caleb. I already knew he wouldn't follow. So I stepped off the porch, frost crunching beneath my shoes, and headed to the one place I always went when my thoughts needed quiet, because tonight, quiet was the only way I'd figure out what came next. I hadn't bought myself a new pair of shoes in almost a year. Every time I even thought about replacing the scuffed soles or the uneven heels, I'd remind myself that Caleb's birthday was coming up. He used to love watches. Back in college, he'd worn the same one until the leather band snapped clean in half. Best brand ever, he always claimed, even when the glass was scratched. That memory followed me through every thrift store aisle, every antique listing I pored over for months, until I finally found one. Restored, still ticking, still solid. A watch time hadn't defeated. I'd polished the band, cleaned the face, wrapped it carefully in silver paper. The cake was even simpler. My hands had made it so many times I didn't need the recipe anymore. Eggs, sugar, dark chocolate, a pinch of salt, my husband's old trick. It was the same cake we'd baked for Caleb every year since he was 5. Back then, he'd laugh with frosting smeared across his cheeks. Now that same frosting clung to my blouse like a stain I couldn't remove. When I finally left the party, I drove home without music, without taking the back roads like I usually did to avoid traffic. I didn't care who saw me, frosting smeared, shaken, silent. I placed the ruined cake on the kitchen counter without looking at it. Later, I iced the bruise blooming dark on my wrist, the spot where the cake pan had slammed into me when Belle shoved the box into my hands. My coat still carried the sickly sweet smell of the frosting I used to make with love. A smell that once meant celebration. Now it clung to me like something spoiled. Before bed, I checked my phone once. Nothing. No missed calls. No text from Caleb asking if I'd gotten home safely. I set the wrapped watch gently in the bedside drawer. It wasn't a gift I could give to anyone else. And somehow, I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. At sunrise the next morning, I sat with a cup of coffee in silence and opened my laptop. I typed into the emergency account the one I'd nearly forgotten existed. Same username, same routing number, same quiet reassurance blinking back at me. We'd opened the account when Caleb first moved out a safety net in case he struggled, something to help him through the transition. I'd kept it open out of habit more than trust. Scrolling through the statements, I felt my chest tighten. Luxury wine subscriptions, spa packages in Portland, designer strollers that cost more than my old car. That wasn't survival. It wasn't even caution. It was indulgence I hadn't been invited to. Then I saw it, tucked between 2 PayPal charges. Low in disbursement. 42,000 cosigner. Lenora Viscari. My heart kicked hard. I clicked it, hands trembling. My name. My social. A signature that looked like mine but wasn't. I stared at it, willing it to vanish. It didn't. They had used me. Quietly. Thoroughly. That afternoon, I drove straight to their house. Caleb answered the door with the kind of casual surprise that told me he wasn't worried. Not even a little. Mom? Hey. What's going on? He stepped aside like everything was normal. I walked past him into the kitchen and turned to face him. There's a loan, I said. $42,000. My name is on it, and that signature isn't mine. He didn't even blink. Mom, we needed it, he said, almost bored. It's not like you're strapped for cash. It's all staying in the family anyway. My throat tightened. I'd given him everything, my trust, my name, my support. And suddenly, it was nothing but a tool. Something he could use without asking, without warning, without shame. I left before the heat in my face turned into tears. If I cried, I would crumble. If I crumbled, I would lose myself entirely. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table, with my hands clenched in my lap. Finally, I reached for the drawer I hadn't opened since the week my husband died. Inside was a folder, still sealed, the one Miriam had prepared for me years ago. Just in case, she'd said softly. I opened it at last. The pages felt heavier than they should have. I hadn't intended to go back to their house so soon. The folder was still lying on the counter, half read, when the walls of my home suddenly felt too tight, too warm. I needed air. I gathered a few old photos I'd found while cleaning out a storage chest, pictures of Caleb as a boy, my husband teaching him to ride a bike, holiday dinners around cramped tables. I thought maybe they'd want them. Maybe it would jog something human in them. When I pulled up to their driveway, the first thing that hit me was the BMW SUV gleaming in the sunlight, bright, spotless, brand new. Not gently used, like Caleb claimed when he begged me to co-sign a car loan for them. Not practical, not affordable. Brand new, a lie polished into metal. I walked to the door and rang the bell, photos tucked under my arm. Belle cracked the door open just enough for her face to appear. You can just leave those, she said coolly, balancing the baby on her hip while scrolling through her phone with the other hand. I hesitated, then held the envelope through the narrow gap. Her manicured nails brushed mine and she didn't look up. Not at me, not at the pictures, not at anything that mattered. As I stepped back, something near the porch bench caught my eye. My husband's leather briefcase. The one he carried every day for 20 years. The one Caleb once promised he'd pass down to his own son. Now it was stuffed with baby wipes and rattles, a diaper bag. My throat tightened, but the tears didn't come. Instead, a cold clarity settled in. I turned away, walked past the gleaming BMW, and got into my own car. My hands shook, but my thoughts were razor sharp. At home, I laid the folder open in front of me, flipped to the tab labeled Joint Assets, and began making a list. Then, I picked up the phone and dialed Miriam. The steel drawer in the back of my closet hadn't been touched in months. It sat wedged beneath an old quilt, the tiny key still tied to the ribbon I sometimes wore around my neck in the winter. I sat on the edge of the bed, unlocked the drawer, and felt the weight of everything I'd tucked away more carefully than I ever realized. On top was the house deed. My name, only my name written across the title. Caleb had once suggested transferring it for security, saying, "Just in case something happens, Mom." I told him I'd think about it. I never did. And for the first time, my stubborn hesitation felt like a blessing. Beneath the deed lay the power of attorney documents I had revoked last winter. I remembered how gently Miriam had worded it when she suggested the change. Just protect yourself, she'd said. Back then, it felt unnecessary. Now it felt prophetic. At the bottom was a thick envelope marked in my handwriting. In case of emergency. I held it for a long time, my thumb resting on the seal, pulse tapping against the paper. I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I spread everything across the bed, every document, every signature, every quiet decision I'd once made, out of hope or habit. For years, I believed that if I kept giving, kept helping, kept showing up, kept baking cakes and wiring money and absorbing insults, they'd eventually see me, respect me, choose me. But now I understood something I'd avoided for too long. My silence hadn't bought peace. It had bought permission. Permission for them to take more, push more, expect more, and give nothing in return. When Caleb forged my name, I wasn't surprised. When Belle laughed in my face, I wasn't shocked. When no one called, I wasn't even hurt anymore. I was simply done pretending I didn't already know who they had become. I gathered the documents, slid them back into the drawer, and stood up with a steadiness I hadn't felt in months. Then I went downstairs, brewed a fresh pot of coffee, and opened my laptop again, not to ignore the numbers this time, but to act on them. I would be subtracting, not adding. Miriam didn't ask why when I walked into her office. She closed her planner with a soft snap, folded her hands, and waited. I placed the folder on her desk. My fingers trembled, but my voice was steady. I told her everything. The forged loan, the house Caleb wanted transferred, the drained account they'd treated like a gift basket. She didn't look surprised, only determined. "We'll start with the essentials," she said. By the end of the hour, 3 actions were filed. A freeze on all pending transfers involving my home, a formal challenge to contest the $42,000 loan using proof of forgery, a full lock on every shared account connected to my name, current or past. The harder part came after. I drove home, sat at my kitchen table, and stared at the phone number of the dealership where Caleb claimed he bought a used family car. The paperwork was still in my filing cabinet, and it still listed me as a legal co-owner. After 20 minutes of stillness, I dialed. I explained the situation. I revoked all authorization. They said they would flag the vehicle for recovery. I didn't do it to punish him. I did it because it was mine. Because he'd taken it, as if I wouldn't notice. As if I didn't matter. 2 days later, the fallout began. 2 days later, the consequences finally caught up. Caleb called me 3 times in a row. I let each call ring until it cut off. The 4th call came from an unknown number. I ignored that one too. Then the messages started. His card had been declined at a gas station. Belle's monthly subscription boxes had stopped shipping. The wine deliveries gone. The cosmetics kits canceled. The baby gear halted. By evening, the dealership left a voicemail. The BMW SUV had been officially scheduled for repossession. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel guilty. I felt still a rare, unwavering stillness that settled deep inside me. For the first time in years, silence wasn't something suffocating me. It belonged to me. That evening, I took a slow walk around the block. When I returned, the house felt different. Not empty, but peaceful. On the side table, the heavy sealed envelope I'd avoided for years waited like a patient reminder. This time, I reached for it. Not out of dread, out of readiness. I sat down, breathing deeply, and opened it. Inside were letters from myself to myself, written in moments when I feared no one would ever protect me. I read them all. The dealership moved faster than I expected. Within 48 hours, they confirmed the paperwork. The BMW, the shiny symbol Caleb flaunted around town, had never actually belonged to him. Legally, it was mine the whole time. All those months, he paraded it as his success. All those stories about providing for his family, all that ego. None of it had been real. It was built on my signature, my credit, my name. On the 3rd morning, I got a short voicemail. The SUV had been recovered from the edge of Caleb's office parking lot. No confrontation, no fight. Just a tow truck and a clipboard. I replayed the message twice. then set my phone down and made tea with steady hands. That afternoon, I went to restock my pantry. I didn't expect to see Belle there, but life has a talent for placing truth right in your path. She stood under the grocery store awning, a toddler perched on her hip. Her hair was undone, her face was bare. Her usual confidence was nowhere to be seen, and behind her, no luxury SUV, just empty asphalt. The moment she spotted me, her expression twisted first into anger, then confusion, then something I recognized far too clearly, entitlement wounded by consequence. Her jaw clenched like she expected me to apologize, like I owed her something. I didn't slow down. I didn't change direction. I walked right past her, my cart rattling over the pavement. She muttered something under her breath as the toddler fussed, but I didn't turn to listen. Inside, the cool air wrapped around me, and a deep calm settled in my chest. It wasn't triumph. It was clarity. The kind that arrives only after years of being dismissed, overlooked, and unheard. When I stepped outside again with my groceries, the spot where Belle had been standing was empty, as if she'd never been there at all. My phone vibrated. Caleb's name filled the screen. The moment I stepped out of the store, my phone buzzed again, Caleb's name pulsing on the screen like a warning light. I let it ring twice, 3 times, then finally answered. The wind carried his breathless voice before he even formed a sentence. Mom, Belle said everything's frozen. The car's gone. What's happening? He sounded rattled. Not angry, not yet, but shaken, like he'd just realized the ground beneath him wasn't solid anymore. I leaned against the trunk of my car, letting the silence stretch long enough for him to feel it. Then I spoke. I asked for respect, I said quietly. You repaid me with insults and forged signatures. A sharp exhale crackled through the line. Mom, come on. This isn't just about us anymore. We have a baby. We need that car. We need those accounts. Can't you just switch things back? Switch things back. As if my boundaries were furniture he could rearrange whenever he felt like it. He kept talking, piling excuses on top of each other. Just until we figure things out. Belle's a wreck. I'm trying to keep everything together. You know how it is. Please, Mom. I closed my eyes. Memories rose, uninvited, packing his lunches before dawn, walking miles when the car broke down so he wouldn't miss school, skipping meals so he could eat enough, buying shoes for him instead of myself. All the invisible sacrifices, tucked into quiet days. I gave you food I didn't eat, I said softly. I gave you time I didn't have, and you stood there while your wife mocked me in front of strangers. The line fell silent. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Only the wind moved. When he finally whispered, I didn't know what to say. It was too small, too late, too hollow to matter. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't repeat myself. I didn't explain again. You made your choices. Now I'm making mine. And I ended the call. The phone buzzed again before I even put it in my purse, but I didn't look at the screen. I drove home in the fading afternoon light, feeling more grounded with every mile. 2 mornings later, something unexpected happened. A small package sat neatly against my front door. No return address, no handwriting, just my name printed in stiff block letters. I carried it to the kitchen and set it on the table. For a long moment, I just stared at it, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the warm hush of the house. Finally, I peeled the tape away and lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in soft tissue paper, lay something I hadn't seen in years. Caleb's old college watch. The one with the scratched face and worn leather band, the watch he wore every day. Back when he still asked me to sew missing buttons on his shirts. But now, it gleamed. The glass had been polished. The leather band replaced. The clasp fixed. It looked almost new, like time itself had been wound backward. Beneath it was a small photograph, glossy, old, precious. Caleb at 8 years old, cheeks puffed as he blew out candles on a chocolate cake. My cake, his father's recipe. his smile wide enough to tilt his whole face. I held the picture for a long time, tracing the edge with my thumb. 1,000 birthdays lived inside that moment, 1,000 choices, 1,000 pieces of love I'd given freely, never keeping score. I placed the watch on the shelf beside a framed photo of my husband. Then I tucked the birthday picture behind it, hidden from guests, but visible to me whenever I walked past. I didn't text Caleb. I didn't call. I didn't send the box back. I just stood there, letting the quiet settle around me, letting it mean something new. Then I closed the glass cabinet, the soft click sealing the watch and the photograph somewhere safe. Somewhere still mine. Spring didn't arrive with fanfare. It slipped in quietly, soft rain tapping against the windows, the air smelling of new beginnings. One morning, I stood at the curb with a screwdriver in hand and replaced the old metal plaque on my mailbox. The new one gleamed. Lenora Viscari. No household, no family name, no shared anything, just mine. Inside, I repainted the kitchen in a warm, gentle shade that reminded me of early morning sunlight. I cleared away the clutter that had gathered on the counters, notes, coupons, stray objects that belonged to no one anymore. Then I put the house deed on the refrigerator door, held up by a little pear-shaped magnet my husband once bought at a roadside market on a whim. Every time I opened the fridge, it greeted me like a quiet promise. You stayed, and it's still yours. I didn't invite anyone over. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. But I pulled out the old recipe card anyway, the one with a cocoa stain in the corner and fading ink from years of use. I baked the cake exactly the way I always had, slowly, deliberately, letting the scent of chocolate and vanilla fill the house. My hands moved from memory muscle, memory built from years of birthdays, celebrations, and ordinary days filled with quiet effort. That evening, I sat at the small kitchen table with a single slice of cake and a cup of tea. No candle, no toast, no audience. But that first bite tasted different, richer, warmer, softer. Not because the recipe changed, but because, for the first time, I wasn't baking it for anyone else. It was mine. A celebration of my own survival, my own reclaiming. I didn't check my phone. I didn't wonder whether Caleb would reach out again. I didn't wait for a knock on the door or a card in the mail. For once, I let the silence remain exactly as long as it needed to, and it didn't feel empty anymore. Before going upstairs, I passed the bookshelf and paused. Behind the glass cabinet door sat the watch, polished, still, quietly ticking, and the photo tucked behind it. I didn't open the door. I didn't touch anything. I just looked at it for a moment, nodded to myself, and turned off the light. Then I walked upstairs and went to bed, holding the quiet the way someone finally holds something they know they deserve. Something they fought for. Something that is, at last, their own.